I wasn't planning to walk that far. Honestly, I didn't plan much at all anymore. It had been 3 weeks since Daniel left. Or rather, 3 weeks since I came home to find his keys on the counter and a half-written note next to the coffee machine that just read, "I can't do this anymore. You need something I can't give." No explanation, no confrontation, just silence. So here I was, walking aimlessly beyond the edge of town, hoping the wind might carry away some of the thoughts that had been stuck like splinters in my chest. The fields were empty and wide, stretching into a horizon of soft hills and dying trees. It was early autumn, my favorite time of year, and yet it felt like the world had lost its color. Everything muted, just like me. I told myself I just needed air. I wasn't trying to run away, just get outside of my own skin for a while. But of course, the sky had other plans. The first low grumble of thunder was almost lazy. I looked up, squinting at a darkening patch in the clouds. A breeze picked up, curling around my neck like a cold hand. Then came the second rumble, angrier. And that's when the rain started. Fast, hard, and unrelenting. The kind of storm that doesn't tap politely but crashes down like it's been holding a grudge. I tried to run, but my sneakers were already soaked. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, the road slick and shiny beneath me. My jacket did nothing. My hair was plastered to my forehead within minutes. I was stupid for walking this far. There were no shops, no gas stations, no bus stops. Just gravel, wet leaves, and open land. And then, in a break between the trees, I saw it. A single light glowing from a window not too far off the path. A cabin, small, wooden, tucked into the hillside like it had grown there. I hesitated. This wasn't a town. This was someone's home. Some old man probably lived there with a shotgun and a grudge against strangers. But lightning cracked loud overhead, and I flinched so hard I nearly slipped on the mud. Screw it. I was already drenched and freezing. My pride could take a back seat. I jogged up the narrow dirt trail leading to the front porch, boots squishing with each step. The cabin was simple. Dark wood with a stone chimney and a slanted tin roof. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and golden light flickered behind thick curtains. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. My heart thudded in my ears. What if they didn't answer? What if... The door creaked open, and standing there was a man. Older than me, late 30s, maybe early 40s. Rugged, not in a manufactured way, but in the way of someone who worked with his hands and didn't talk much about it. He had a thick flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, dark jeans, and bare feet on wooden floors. His face was shadowed at first, but then he stepped into the light and I caught the sharpness of his cheekbones, the rough stubble along his jaw, and most of all, his eyes. Piercing, steady, blue-gray like the sky behind me. He looked at me, then at the rain behind me, then back at me. "You lost?" he asked, voice low and even. I kind of got caught out walking. The storm. I stopped rambling when he just stepped back and pushed the door open wider. "You can dry off in here. No questions. No small talk. Just quiet invitation." I stepped inside, my shoes squeaking against the floor. The warmth hit me like a blanket, thick and soft. The fireplace was alive with orange flames, casting shadows along the wood-paneled walls. The cabin smelled like pine and something faintly sweet, maybe cinnamon or warm bread. He shut the door behind me. I stood awkwardly, dripping onto his rug. He left the room and came back with a towel and a folded hoodie. "You'll catch cold in that," he said, nodding to my soaked jacket. "Thanks," I said, voice hoarse. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, just watching me quietly. Not suspicious, just observing. His presence was calm but full, like he didn't waste words unless they meant something. "I'm Noah," I said eventually, trying to bridge the silence. He nodded. "Calum." We didn't shake hands. He just motioned toward a chair near the fire. "Sit. Warm up. I'll make tea." And just like that, I was in a stranger's home, surrounded by the crackle of fire, the hum of boiling water, and a quiet man with kind eyes. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was unraveling. Calum's house felt like a pause button had been pressed on the rest of the world. He handed me a hoodie, soft, slightly oversized, smelled faintly like cedar and would smoke, and a pair of sweats that hung a little loose at the waist. I changed in the small guest bathroom, peeling off my soaked clothes and toweling down my hair. My skin prickled as it dried, but the fabric clung to me like comfort. When I returned to the living room, Calum was lighting another small candle on the windowsill. The storm still raged outside, but inside, the flicker of flame, the scent of tea steeping, and the hush of the space wrapped around me like something sacred. "Hope you're okay with soup," he said, setting down 2 bowls on a small wooden table near the hearth. "I'm more than okay with soup," I replied, stomach growling louder than my pride would have liked to admit. It was simple: lentils, herbs, carrots, a little spice. But it was hot and hearty and tasted like it had been simmering all afternoon. The kind of meal made without rush. Calum didn't talk much while we ate, and strangely, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. His presence wasn't awkward or closed off, it was measured, like he only spoke when something was worth saying. I found myself watching him as I ate. The way he cradled his mug with both hands like it was a habit. The way he stirred his tea not in circles, but gently back and forth. The way he listened fully without interrupting when I finally began to speak. "I didn't plan to end up here," I said, my voice small under the weight of the fire's crackle. "I was just walking, trying to clear my head, I guess." Calum nodded once, still didn't speak. "My boyfriend, I guess he just left. No warning. Just a note and a pair of coffee mugs still warm from that morning." That earned a slight tilt of Calum's head. Not pity, but something like understanding. "I thought we were okay. Not perfect, but trying, you know? And now I've been walking through these thoughts like they're fog I can't see through." He didn't jump in with advice. "No, you'll find someone better," or "time heals everything." Just silence and slow sips from his mug. It gave me room to breathe. I appreciated that more than I could say. Eventually, we moved to the 2 old armchairs by the fireplace. He pulled a soft throw blanket from the back of his and draped it over my lap without asking. I tried not to overthink the gesture. Tried not to read into the way his fingers brushed my knee just slightly before pulling away. The flames flickered shadows across his face, softening the sharper lines of his jaw. His eyes were still intense, sharp but not cold, like they saw too much and carried it quietly. "You live out here alone?" I asked. He nodded. "Couple years now. Needed quiet. This place had it." "You don't get lonely?" "Sometimes," he said, "but not as much as you'd think." We sat in that quiet for a while. The storm outside thudded against the windows. Inside, the fire cracked and popped gently. I pulled the hoodie's collar higher on my neck. "Thanks for letting me in," I said. Calum gave a short nod. Storm's no place for someone walking alone. Would have been cruel not to. He turned his eyes back to the fire, and I followed his gaze. There was something calming about him. Not just the way he moved or spoke, but the way he existed in silence. He made the quiet feel intentional, not like something to be filled, but something to be respected. He didn't ask about Daniel again. Didn't ask what I did for work, or if anyone was looking for me, or what my plan was. He just offered warmth, space, and a stillness I hadn't realized I needed. Later that evening, he handed me a fresh cup of tea, and I caught myself watching his hands again. Broad palms, scarred knuckles, fingers that moved with care like they understood fragility. The storm outside rolled on through the night, but inside that cabin, something unspoken settled between us. Not attraction, not yet, but something quieter, something curious. A slow opening like the way embers glow before they ignite. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew it wasn't nothing. It happened with a flicker, then everything went dark. The lights blinked twice and disappeared with a low electrical hum. The soft hum of the refrigerator cut out. The cabin was swallowed by silence, save for the persistent thrum of rain and the distant cracking of thunder. Calum didn't even flinch. "Well," he said, rising from his chair. "There goes the grid." He grabbed a small box from the cabinet by the fireplace and pulled out a handful of beeswax candles, setting them methodically around the room. He lit each one with a long match, his movements steady, practiced. The warm, amber glow softened everything. The wooden walls, the shadows on our faces, even the ache in my chest. "You deal with this a lot?" I asked, watching him work. "Often enough. Lines out here are old. Storm like this? Doesn't take much." When he sat back down, the light danced in his eyes in a way the overhead bulbs never could have. There was something about him in that glow. His silhouette framed in firelight, the quiet strength in his posture, that made him feel almost unreal, like a story I'd wandered into by accident. We sat for a while, listening to the storm press its palms against the windows. "I used to love storms," I said quietly. "When I was a kid, I'd watch them from the porch, count the seconds between the flash and the thunder. Felt like magic." "You still could," he replied. I looked at him. "It doesn't feel like magic lately." He didn't press, just let the silence stretch again, comfortably. Then, for the first time since I'd arrived, he said something personal. "My partner used to say that too, about the magic." I turned my head, slowly. He didn't look at me, just stared into the fire. He was the kind of person who thought everything had meaning. Storms, coins on the sidewalk, the way people cross the street when they see you coming. I didn't say anything, just let him keep going. We lived in Chicago. Loud, messy city. He loved it. I didn't, but I stayed. For him. "What happened?" I asked gently. Calum exhaled. It wasn't a sigh. More like the kind of breath you take when you're carrying something heavy up a hill. "Cancer. Fast. Unfair." My stomach clenched. Don't," he said, not unkindly. "I don't tell people for sympathy. It's just part of the story." His voice was calm, but there was a throb of something underneath. Not grief exactly. Not anymore. Just memory. Time reshaped into a dull weight you learn to carry. "How long has it been?" 5 years. I nodded even though he wasn't looking. "I don't think I ever really dealt with it. Just left. Bought this place. Let the quiet swallow me. Figured it was better than pretending I was okay. That made me sit up straighter. Felt too familiar. Sometimes I wonder if I left too," I said. "I mean, Daniel left me, but maybe I was already halfway gone. Just walking through our life pretending I wasn't tired." Calum looked at me then. Really looked. Like he saw something unraveling and didn't want to interrupt. "No one teaches us how to leave gently," he said. The fire popped between us, like it wanted to fill in the silence. But neither of us needed it. There was a strange peace in that space, like the truth had softened the air between us instead of thickening it. He stood up a few minutes later, rubbing a hand over the back of his neck. "You should get some rest," he said. "Spare rooms down the hall. Sheets are clean." I rose, legs a little stiff. My body felt heavier than before, but not in a bad way, just more grounded. Like I'd set something down without realizing I'd been carrying it all day. "Thanks," I said. "Really. For the soup, the fire, letting me stay." He gave a small nod. "Storm's still going. You'd have been miserable out there." But I could tell he wasn't brushing it off. That simple thank you had landed somewhere. Quietly, he walked down the hall, and I turned into the guest room. Small, cozy, with a handmade quilt on the bed and a lamp I couldn't turn on anymore. I changed into the dry clothes again and pulled the blanket around my shoulders, but sleep didn't come. I lay there listening. The storm had softened now to a steady drumbeat, almost soothing. Somewhere, a branch tapped against the glass rhythmically, and yet, I couldn't stop thinking about him. His voice, the way he stirred his tea, the way he said his partner's name without needing to say it aloud. I stood up, walked barefoot into the hallway. The candle on the small table outside my door was still flickering. I stood in front of his closed bedroom door for a long moment, heart tapping out a rhythm I didn't recognize. I didn't know what I wanted to say, just that something in me pulled forward. Maybe I wanted to tell him that I was sorry for his loss. Maybe I wanted to thank him again properly. Maybe I just didn't want to go to sleep without one more second of his voice. I raised my hand toward the door, paused, then slowly let it fall. Instead, I walked back to my room and climbed beneath the quilt. The storm might have been quieting outside, but inside me, something new had started to stir. The first thing I noticed was the stillness. No rain tapping on the windows. No thunder rumbling through the hills. Just quiet, soft, and golden, like the world had exhaled. I blinked against the pale light filtering through the curtains and pulled the quilt tighter around me for a moment before rising. My body ached in the way it does after an emotional release, like I'd finally let myself be tired. When I stepped into the hallway, the scent of coffee drifted toward me, rich and earthy. The cabin felt different in daylight, less like a stranger's place and more like something out of a memory I didn't know I had. Calum was already in the kitchen, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. His flannel shirt was unbuttoned over a white tee, sleeves pushed up again, forearms dusted with flour. "You sleep okay?" he asked without turning around. "Better than I expected," I replied, voice still rough. He handed me a mug. "I'm not a gourmet, but I make decent pancakes. You good with that?" I smiled. "I'm good with anything I didn't have to microwave." He cracked a small grin, first I'd seen, and something inside me warmed that had nothing to do with the coffee. We moved around the kitchen in an easy rhythm. I set the table while he flipped pancakes on a cast-iron skillet. We didn't speak much, but it wasn't the awkward quiet from yesterday. It was comfortable.
Familiar, somehow.
"Maple syrup's in the pantry," he said. I retrieved it and poured some out while he plated the food. We sat down, elbows almost brushing across the small wooden table. Halfway through the meal, I said, "Thank you again. I know I already said it, but I really mean it." Calum shrugged like he didn't need thanks, but I caught the faint smile that tugged at the edge of his mouth. "It's nothing. You needed a place." I nodded slowly. Still, not everyone would have opened the door. He looked at me then. I steady. "I would've." After breakfast, I offered to help clean up, but Calum waved me off. "Want to pay me back?" he asked, tilting his head toward the back window. "Sure. Help me chop some firewood." I raised an eyebrow. "That's the trade-off for pancakes, huh?" He smirked. "Fair, isn't it?" We stepped outside and into the bright aftermath of the storm. The trees were dripping, leaves clean and gleaming. The air smelled like pine and wet earth. It was quiet except for the distant call of birds and the occasional drop of water falling from the roof. Calum handed me a pair of gloves and an axe, then picked up his own. He showed me how to split the logs properly. Precise swings, legs apart, shoulders relaxed. We worked side by side, the rhythm of it hypnotic. He didn't correct me unless I asked. Just let me figure it out on my own. Occasionally, our eyes would meet, and there'd be a pause, brief but charged, like something unsaid hovered between us. At one point, I reached for a smaller piece of wood at the same time he did. Our hands collided. His fingers brushed mine, not cold, not hesitant. We both froze. I looked up, and his eyes were already on me. Something passed in that silence. A flicker of something deeper than gratitude or politeness. A spark, held tight and cautious. Neither of us said a word. I didn't move my hand. Neither did he. Then, slowly, he let go, picking up another piece of wood as if nothing had happened. But it had. I felt it in my chest, in the quiet thrum beneath my ribs. Something was shifting. I glanced at the horizon, the long gravel road I'd come in from, the same one that would take me back to the city. I didn't want to go. Not yet. "You ever need help with anything else?" I asked, tossing another log into the pile. Calum raised a brow. "Thinking of sticking around?" I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Depends. You pay in pancakes." He let out a low laugh. Not forced, real. Warm. "We'll see," he said, voice softer than before. We went back to work, but now there was a rhythm between us that hadn't been there before. Not just in the wood or the chopping or the morning sun, but in the silence, in the pauses, in the way he didn't pull away too fast. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just hiding from something anymore. I was moving toward something, even if I didn't know exactly what. By late morning, the sun had stretched fully over the hills, drying what was left of the storm's chaos. The trees shimmered with leftover raindrops, and the gravel road looked less like a trap and more like a path I wasn't in a hurry to follow. "You ever walk the ridge trail?" Calum asked as he stepped back onto the porch with a second cup of coffee in hand. I shook my head. "Didn't exactly come out here with hiking shoes." He glanced down at my borrowed boots, his actually, a size too big, but dry. "They'll do." And just like that, we set out. The ridge trail started behind his property, rising gently through tall, spindly trees whose branches filtered the sunlight into broken gold. The path was narrow but well-worn, a quiet tunnel through the woods where time slowed and breath came easier. We didn't talk much at first. The birds filled in the silence with rustling wings and sharp chirps, and the wind made the trees creak like they were shifting secrets between themselves. But then I asked, "Was it hard? Leaving the city?" Calum gave a thoughtful hum. "Not as hard as staying." I waited, sensing there was more, and eventually he gave it. "After Ben died, I couldn't hear myself think. Friends meant well, but everything felt performative. The city never slowed down long enough for me to catch my breath." "Is that what this place is for?" I asked. "Catching your breath?" He nodded. "I needed somewhere the world didn't knock every 5 minutes. Somewhere quiet enough that I could actually sit with the grief." "And now?" I asked. "Now?" He paused, brushing a low branch out of his way. "Now the silence isn't just grief. It's peace. Some days." We kept walking. I wanted to ask about Ben, but I didn't. I didn't need names and dates to understand what kind of love had been lost. The way Calum said his name carried a kind of reverence I'd only ever heard in church. Except this felt holier. He asked about me eventually, where I was from, what I did. "Graphic designer," I said. "Mostly freelance. Logos, websites, branding packages. Soulless corporate fluff." He smirked. "Does it pay well?" "Depends on the client. Some pay on time. Others disappear the minute I hit send." Calum didn't ask about Daniel. But when I mentioned I used to live with someone, his gaze flicked toward me. Curious, but gentle. I didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. He seemed to understand without the ugly details. We stopped at the top of the ridge, where the trees broke open into a wide view of the valley. You could see the roof of his cabin below, a patch of silver among the green. The wind tugged at my sleeves. I turned to look at him, and for a moment, all the thoughts that had buzzed around me since yesterday, about heartbreak, about running, about endings, went quiet. He looked grounded, like he belonged here in a way most people never do anywhere. And for the first time since I'd met him, I realized I wasn't just grateful he'd taken me in. I liked him, not just his kindness or his calm or his coffee, but him, the quiet strength, the way he didn't demand space but still filled it. He caught me looking. I looked away quickly, suddenly unsure of what was showing on my face. Later that evening, after a lazy late lunch and a shared silence on the porch swing, he brought out a bottle of red wine and 2 mismatched glasses. "You drink?" he asked. "Not usually, but I'm not saying no." We sat on the porch while the sun dipped behind the hills, washing everything in warm amber. The cicadas had started singing, and the air smelled faintly of damp soil and wildflowers. He poured slowly, then handed me a glass. "To surviving the storm," I said. He clinked his glass against mine. "And to pancakes." We drank in companionable silence for a while, the swing creaking beneath us like a lullaby. The warmth of the wine curled in my chest, loosening something that had been tight for weeks. I turned to him, watched the way the fading light caught the side of his face. "Do you ever get lonely?" I asked. He didn't look at me right away. His eyes stayed on the horizon for a long beat. The wineglass in his hand was still half full, fingertips resting on the stem with delicate control. Then, without speaking, he reached across the narrow space between us and placed his hand on mine. Not a dramatic gesture, not sudden, just steady, warm, deliberate. His palm covered the back of my hand completely, and though he said nothing, I could feel the answer in his touch. Yes, and maybe not tonight. I didn't speak either, didn't pull away, I just turned my hand slowly under his until our fingers wove together, quiet and natural like they'd done it before. For a long time we just sat like that. Two men on a porch, the day bleeding into night, the silence between them no longer heavy but full of breath and maybe. And in that moment I knew he wasn't a stranger anymore. And I didn't want to be one either. By the time the last bit of orange slipped behind the hills, the air had shifted again. It was subtle at first, a hush falling over the trees, the breeze turning damp and expectant. I leaned forward on the porch swing, watching the horizon as clouds began to gather like slow-moving ink in the sky. Calum noticed too. He stood, glass still in hand, and tilted his face toward the wind. "Storm's circling back," he said. I could already hear it. The low, distant grumble that barely registered at first but grew louder as the clouds rolled in. It wasn't the wild chaos of the night before. This one crept in softly, like it had unfinished business. We stepped inside as the first drops began to tap gently against the windows. Calum lit a few candles again, though the power stayed on for now. The fire in the hearth had been rekindled with fresh wood, casting slow-moving shadows against the walls. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It had changed shape. It was taut now, like a wire pulled between us, humming just beneath the surface. He poured us both another small glass of wine, and we sat near the big window overlooking the woods, the candlelight behind us casting a golden halo around the glass. I tried not to watch him too closely, but every small thing. His steady hands, the way his eyes softened when he thought no one was looking, was starting to feel like gravity. A flash of lightning streaked across the clouds, briefly illuminating the whole room in sharp blue. I flinched. He noticed. "You all right?" "Yeah," I said a little too fast. He studied me for a moment. Then, quietly, "You don't have to be brave. Not here." My breath caught. There was no challenge in his voice, just calm certainty. Like he was offering something I hadn't realized I needed. I looked down at my hands. They were resting on my knees, fingers clenched. I tried to say something light, something safe, but it caught in my throat. Another rumble of thunder shook the window just slightly. The wind began to whistle through the trees. I turned to him. He was already looking at me, and in that quiet stormlit space we both stopped pretending. He leaned in first, but only a little, enough that I could meet him halfway if I wanted to. And I did. Our lips touched like a question. Soft, uncertain, trembled by nerves and silence. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't rushed or fiery. It was gentle, searching. A kiss with the weight of two people who hadn't expected anything and found themselves wanting everything, all at once. When we pulled apart, neither of us spoke. He kept his hand resting on my thigh, steady and warm, like an anchor. I leaned my forehead against his, eyes closed, breathing him in. Outside, the storm picked up, the rain falling harder now, a soft, rhythmic tapping on the windows. Lightning lit the room again, this time bathing us both in silver blue light for a heartbeat before fading back into candle glow. We didn't need more than that moment. He didn't pull me into anything more. He didn't suggest anything, didn't press. Instead, we sat by the window, shoulders touching, hands quietly tangled together, just watching the storm play out across the glass. It felt like a kind of trust one hadn't known I was missing. Later, when the clock ticked toward midnight and the thunder moved farther into the distance, Calum stood and offered me his hand. I took it. He led me down the hallway, not to the guest room this time, but to his. The bed was simple. The sheets smelled like cedar and something faintly herbal. I climbed under them without thinking twice. He settled in beside me, careful not to crowd, just close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. We didn't touch right away. We didn't need to. Eventually, his hand found mine beneath the covers. Our fingers fit like they had earlier, quiet, unforced. I lay awake for a while, listening to his breathing grow even beside me, watching the storm's reflection flicker across the ceiling. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong. I didn't feel like I had to guard myself. I just existed, in the same space as someone who made silence feel like safety. There was nothing rushed, nothing expected, just the sound of the rain, the warmth of his hand, and the steady rhythm of something that felt dangerously close to hope. Morning came gently, without thunder or drama, just light spilling slowly through the bedroom window, softening everything it touched. Calum was still asleep beside me, his back turned, one arm draped loosely over the pillow where I'd been. I lay there for a moment longer, memorizing the curve of his shoulder, the steady rise and fall of his breath, the way the golden light traced his silhouette like it belonged to him. I didn't want to move, but I knew I had to. The real world waited just beyond the trees. Emails I hadn't answered, projects still half finished, rent to pay, friends probably wondering if I'd ghosted them completely. And beneath all that, a mess I hadn't cleaned up yet, the remnants of a breakup still sharp around the edges. I slipped out of bed quietly and changed into the clothes I'd worn the day I arrived, now dry and faintly smelling of wood smoke. I padded into the kitchen, poured water into the kettle, and set it on the stove. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps. Calum entered, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, hair tousled in a way that made him look a little younger. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I echoed, trying to smile without it faltering. He poured us both coffee in silence, the comfortable kind we'd gotten good at. But beneath it, something else simmered now, something heavier. The weight of the inevitable. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around the mug. "I should probably head back today." Calum nodded, not surprised. "Yeah, I figured. I've got work, and some stuff to sort through. Life doesn't pause forever." "No," he said. "It doesn't." He sat across from me, fingers lightly tapping the side of his mug. I don't know what this was," I admitted, voice low, "or what it is. But it mattered." He looked up then, meeting my gaze. It did. We exchanged numbers, phones clumsy in our hands. We didn't promise anything. We didn't pretend to know how this would work. But it felt important, anchoring something in reality before it could drift off completely into dream. Outside, the sun was rising higher, burning off the mist that clung to the hills. The cabin looked different now, less like a secret and more like a memory in the making. I gathered my things. The borrowed hoodie, which I folded neatly and left on the arm of the couch. The boots, now just a little broken in. Calum walked me to the porch. We stood there for a moment, looking out at the gravel path that led back to everything I hadn't wanted to face. I turned to him. "Thank you for everything." He didn't say "you're welcome," didn't tell me to stay, just looked at me with that same quiet intensity I'd come to recognize. Like he wasn't just seeing me, but measuring the moment itself. Then softly, "If you ever need to lose yourself again, you know where to find me." That broke something gently inside me, in the best way. I nodded, afraid my voice wouldn't come out steady if I tried to speak. I started walking slowly, gravel crunching beneath my feet, bag slung over my shoulder. When I reached the bend in the trail, I turned back. He was still there, standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, watching me like he wasn't ready to turn away either. And in that last glance, I knew this wasn't over. Even if I couldn't say when or how or what it would become. Some things don't end. They just pause, waiting for the right time to begin again. The city didn't feel like home anymore. It had only taken a few days to fall back into old rhythms. Emails, traffic, half-heard conversations in coffee shops. But even when I was doing everything right, working, smiling, pretending, I felt like I was walking through someone else's life. The air was louder, the light harsher. People talked too fast and didn't wait for answers. I'd cross the same streets I used to know blindfolded and still feel disoriented. Like something had shifted, not in the world, but in me. And through it all, I kept thinking about him. Calum. The way his voice dropped just slightly when he said something serious. The way his hands were steady and warm and always a little rough around the edges. The silence he carried like a second language. Every night, I'd lie in bed and remember how it felt to fall asleep beside someone who didn't expect anything from me except honesty. Someone who didn't try to fix me or fill the silence. Someone who just stayed. I told myself it had just been the storm, the isolation, A trick of timing and emotion and gratitude. But I knew better. It wasn't just that he'd let me in. It was that once I was in, he never made me feel like I had to leave. 3 weeks passed. I kept my head down, turned in a couple of client projects, went through the motions of being okay. But I wasn't. I missed him. In a quiet, aching way that lingered even after I told myself to move on. Then, one evening, the rain started again. Not a storm, just a steady drizzle against the city windows. But it felt like a whisper, like a pull. I didn't overthink it. I packed a small bag, grabbed my keys, and drove. The highway was slick with light rain, reflecting the glow of headlights and street lamps like melted gold. I didn't turn on the radio. I just let the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the tires carry me forward, mile after mile, until the concrete gave way to gravel and the trees grew taller again. By the time I reached the cabin, night had fully settled in. The porch light was on. I parked and stepped out into the soft hush of the woods. The rain had stopped, but the trees still dripped from earlier, their branches sighing with every breeze. The sky was cloudy, the moon just a faint blur above. I stood there for a moment, heart hammering. What if he'd moved on? What if I'd imagined the whole thing meant more than it did? But then the front door creaked open, and there he was, Calum, standing in the doorway, arms relaxed at his sides, eyes steady as ever. He looked the same, maybe a little more tired, maybe not. His expression didn't shift into surprise. If anything, he looked like he'd been expecting me all along. No words, not at first. Just a quiet knowing that filled the space between us like breath. I stepped forward, crossing the porch in 3 strides, and then he was in front of me and I didn't hesitate. I wrapped my arms around him, and he held me back without a second's pause. Tight, sure, grounding. I could feel the rise and fall of his chest, the warmth of his breath near my ear, the steadiness that had pulled me in from the start. I didn't get lost in the storm, I whispered. I found something. He pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes searching, as if making sure I meant it. And I did. He opened the door wider, and I stepped inside. The cabin smelled the same. Pine wood, candle wax, something faintly herbal from the kitchen. The fire was already going in the hearth, casting that soft, dancing light that made everything feel safer somehow. I dropped my bag by the door. He poured us both tea, and we sat near the fire in those same 2 chairs, hands resting between us, fingers brushing but not quite locking yet. There was no rush now. I kept thinking about you, I said. He nodded once. Same. I didn't know if you'd want me to come back. I didn't know if you'd believe you could. Our fingers finally intertwined, slow and certain. The silence stretched, but not because we didn't have anything to say. It was because we didn't need to say it all right now. There'd be time. Outside, the wind rustled the trees gently, like the forest was settling in for the night. The storm was long gone, but the memory of it had rooted something deep in both of us. Calum stood after a while, extending his hand. I took it without question. We didn't need to label anything. Not tonight. Tonight, I just needed this. His hand in mine, the fire warming our faces, the quiet certainty that I hadn't imagined what we'd started. As I crawled into his bed beside him again, I felt the ache in my chest shift. It wasn't pain anymore. It was opening. It wasn't just a thunderstorm that had brought me here. It was something else entirely. Something that didn't end with the rain. And as he curled beside me, shoulder to shoulder, fingers gently brushing against mine beneath the covers, I understood. This wasn't just a storm. It was a beginning. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a comment. We'd love to hear what part stayed with you most. Hit the like button, it really helps us reach more people. Subscribe and turn on the bell, so you never miss another love story. Share this video with someone who believes in unexpected beginnings, because sometimes it's not just a storm, it's the start of something real.